And welcome back to The Motivating Force. I am host Sway, an aspiring Marine Corps officer. I'm currently finishing my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and finishing up ROTC. And joining me as always, we have Justin, a motivational leader who's always more than excited to share our wonderful and exciting new topics with all of you. This is a very exciting episode of Falling Off the Edge of the Earth segment that we're bringing back. Today we're going to be talking about the conspiracy theory that's going on with Jesus's bloodline. And this isn't your run-of-the-mill Jesus like, hey homeboy, what's your name, Jesus? No, this is Jesus from the Bible that we are all familiar with, even if you're not religious, and I'm pretty sure you've heard the name Jesus thrown around. So this conspiracy theory goes back to the time of Christ. Am I right?
It'd be safe to assume that you're right. Yeah. Talking about Jesus would be going back to Jesus times.
Yeah, I would assume so. Not before then. Okay. But anyway, so this is about Jesus Christ and how there's theories that he was married. Not only was he married, but he was married to Mary Magdalene, which is his mother. Mm-hmm. And then that already strikes a lot of arguments and debates in the religious field, and I'm pretty sure philosophical fields.
Did you know it gets worse, though? Because if you don't want to think that he was married to Mary of Magdalene, there was also a belief that he was married to multiple women.
That is also correct, because we're going to be talking about different religions and how they see Jesus and how they viewed him during his time here on earth, and that's going to bring up these different points in our discussion because it's a conspiracy. We're not right. We're not saying any of these are right or wrong, but it's just to talk about it as we do on this Falling Off the Edge of the World segment.
Getting right into it, I was super excited doing the research on this because whenever we talk about the biblical times and with Jesus and everything, we typically only hear about the biblical times of Jesus. We don't hear anything else about what's going on with the rest of the world. What other people have to say, other philosophies, other things that were written down and recorded during that time. There was a whole world going on when Jesus was here.
Yeah, Sauron was trying to get his ring back from Frodo, and it was this whole thing. I know.
We just skipped over all the important stuff, man.
Yeah. Gandalf went from Gandalf the Great to Gandalf the White. How'd you miss that?
We also had the Great White Wolf of the time. The Witchers were here and everything. We just let them go away, man.
Yeah, we just stopped tossing the coin to the Witcher.
All this for Jesus. A worthy sacrifice. But anyways, moving forward from that, on to what we're actually talking about. So we get this whole idea from the agnostic gospels is really where this kind of starts. When we start talking about the concept of Jesus actually being a human being and getting married and having kids and trying to run away from responsibilities.
Yeah.
Because there's reports that he went to multiple different places, which we'll be talking about. But in the Gospel of Philip, this is where it all starts. This is the where points were made about Jesus's personal life on multiple different accounts. And we don't have the Gospel of Philip is obviously not a book that's in the Old Testament or the New Testament. We didn't account for it being a part of the Bible because the Catholics said so. So therefore, it's just the agnostic gospel. There's a couple other ones out there, a couple other scriptures and readings we found at that time period that we just kind of like, yeah, we don't like what's in here, so we're not gonna.
Yeah, that's a big point that's a big point that I wanted to bring up as well, because at the beginning of Catholicism, they looked at all these different scriptures and religions that were around, and they would literally pick and choose what they wanted in their book.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, there's so many different debates and so many different fights over who's wrong and who's right. But that's why this is just us talking. This should be the safe space that you guys can just come and not be offended, even if you do believe in any of these religions. But back to the point.
So with the Catholics picking and choosing which gospels to use and which gospels not to use, not only was it like, hey, we're going to develop this, we're going to put it together in the most logical way, and we're going to create this book about the recordings of Jesus and the laws of God and what the visions of the people towards God and everything. We're going to call it the Bible. We're going to have the Old Testament, and the New Testament's going to come out later. And it's going to be how it is. We're going to form the religion off of this and talk about this miracle that happened in the world. And what happens is, if we don't pick some of these books, but you guys want to take them and start reading them and doing some research in them and kind of really get some other varying viewpoints and especially about like the personal life of Jesus and see what else is going on, that's great. We're going to kill you. Yeah, you're going to be tried for heresy and you're going to be dead and all your research is going to be burned. Yep. And nobody's going to know anything about that because we don't want that book.
Yep.
So that's what happened. This is why we kind of have this like emerging factor and then it kind of goes away. And then the emerging factor of Jesus being married or Jesus going to other countries and fleeing. And then it's just kind of this upwards downhill battle because it exactly, right? Yeah. I said that right. It's that illogical side of it because during the time where we could have really made some concrete evidence towards this, we did our best to destroy it. And of course, some of that's always going to come through.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting seeing other things that were going on at the time. One of the early philosophers, Celsus, in the 2nd century.
Celsius or Fahrenheit? Which one?
Well, you take the I out of it and you pronounce it Celsus.
Oh, okay. My bad.
So he's a 2nd century Greek philosopher who had some writings that did not get destroyed because he was a Greek philosopher, and a lot of Catholics kind of just brushed over the top of that. And he talked about Jesus a little bit. And when he did, these are some of those secretive writings that just kind of slipped by, and we got them today. So he said the grand reason why the Gentiles and philosophers of his school persecuted Jesus Christ was because he had so many wives. There were Elizabeth and Mary and a host of others that followed him. And he goes on to talk more about it that I just didn't feel like including. But the main point being that we do see these, we have these sentences out there. And it's more than just there. It's in the Gospels of Philip. It's in some of these philosophical writings. And
well, it's also, we're kind of speaking from experience because we grew up religious as well. And we're both Christian Baptist, right? Yeah. So we went to a private school where they talked about like his following and like his story, everything through the Bible. And as children, you don't kind of like get to question certain things, but when we do read over the Bible and King James Version and all that stuff, you're sitting there like there's a time gap in this, or like it almost seems like something's missed, like they're leaving something out in context, because there are so many different translations of the book as well, that maybe something could have been misconstrued or just translated incorrectly on purpose. And then when you're saying he's had multiple wives and followers, you can see the possibility, right? Because in Christianity, Jesus is declared to be the Son of God on 2 separate occasions by a voice speaking from heaven. And Jesus is explicitly and implicitly described as the Son of God by himself and by various individuals who appear in the New Testament. Jesus is called the Son of God, while followers of Jesus are called sons of God. Right? So saying that he is a person is different than saying he's like this deity, right? And I'm bringing this point out because I'm going to start talking about other religions that acknowledge his existence, but not as the literal Son of God, right? But real quick, I think I jumped too far ahead, because when you're talking about his followers, we could see the possibility of that happening, right? We're agreeing that he's on this earth, right? We're agreeing that he's always had followers. So who's to say half of those, a couple handful of those weren't actually his wives?
Yeah.
What did it take to be married in those days? He didn't have to go to court.
And that is something to consider, because back in that time as well, it was acceptable to have multiple wives.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with it, right? So, of course, we look at things today. You go back 2,000 years, you're going to think a lot of things were gross or unacceptable or different, right? And then you have what was actually going on. When you actually put yourself in that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to be there, right? What was happening? In that time, the way that philosophy was going, the way that religion was going, people had multiple wives. Even just 100 years later, right? So we're still talking about the same type of culture. We can see with the Greeks, you had, what is the famous saying in some of those islands where they talked about like you married and slept with women to fulfill your duties as a man and to have children and have a legacy, and you slept with men for fun and pleasure.
That's wild.
Yeah. This is nothing that's new.
Yeah.
We think now we've created all these new things and all these crazy things, and it's been around. Yeah. It's been out there. So it's not very far-fetched to think that Jesus could have had not only a wife, but multiple wives.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that when you think about the culture.
Part of the initial beginnings of the arguments is because of that. We're so influenced with the time now and seeing how certain things are wrong because, we're raised Catholic, Christian, whatever religion. And then we go, no, you can't have multiple wives because my whole life it's been that way. Thousands of years ago, it wasn't the same. So to your point, that's a good point. Speaking of points, Mormons, right? So this is another like subsect or what religion, whatever you want to call it, that did agree that Jesus was polygamous. He did have multiple wives.
So since we talked about, of course, the cultural side of it and how it could have been more so that commonplace of everything going on, another thing that we could see is that there was, as we're falling off the edge of the world, I'm going to bring up multiple points that might get sidetracked, so deal with it. We're going to talk about the ancestors paradox. Because, relatively speaking, about relatives, you should have two parents, which means that both of your parents, there was a total of 4 parents, and then 8, and then 16, and then so on and so forth, right? And if we go back 50 generations of that, that's over 1 trillion people. Those numbers don't add up. Something was going on 1,000 years ago and further back, right? And the act of inbreeding through, really it's through cousins. It's a first, second, third, fourth, fifth cousins. And typically after a twice removed cousin, we don't even consider that family anymore, but it's still family. When you put family trees together, when you're talking about thousands of years, we can start dwindling down that ancestor paradox to these numbers that make sense.
Yeah.
And when you go further back in the way that, I've grown up being raised with Christianity, and the belief is that, of course, with the gene pool being more pure at the time of creation, when we had Adam and Eve, we didn't need to have 2 different gene pools kind of come together to create a human being that didn't come out with defects.
Correct.
So during biblical times, when we talk about from Adam and Eve all the way up to Jesus, it was okay, it was accepted to sleep with closer family members, such as brothers, sisters, cousins, things of that nature, because there wasn't enough,
defects in the genes?
Yeah, there wasn't enough defects in the gene pool, so that if you slept with your sister, it was common, and it was okay because the children were going to come out okay.
Yeah. And on that point, it's an actual fact because, like you're saying, in the outside world, other than just what's going on with Jesus, Egyptian pharaohs, they would sleep with brothers and sisters. Like they would be married. Their queen would be their sister because their idea of keeping that pure bloodline. Same thing with Greek and Roman kings and queens. They would marry into the family because they wanted to keep that royal bloodline pure.
Yeah. So, of course, again, saying how today we think of those things as disgusting or wrong or different. Back then it wasn't, and things could have been okay. So there's just another interesting concept there when we talk about Jesus being married to Mary of Magdalene, who was his mother.
Allegedly married. Because, again, conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
All right, onward.
So then, those things were okay. And this is how you can piece it together when you put a bunch of applied knowledge and applied information and you kind of compile all this. You can kind of see where some of this stuff could make sense. And that's the coolest thing about conspiracy theories, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we were going to start talking about Mormons, right? So Mormons viewed Jesus as polygamous, right? They viewed that he could be married multiple times, and I'm pretty sure that's why the LDS says that you can get married multiple times in a Mormon temple, right? You can be men can be married to multiple women, and I'm pretty sure that's because since they have that belief of Jesus being polygamous, they can do the same, right? Now onto another religion, we have Judaism, right? As Christians, we learn that Jesus was a Jew. Some Jewish writers and scholars have considered Jesus as the most influential false prophet. So
You know, it's funny. I had a really interesting conversation, again, growing up through Christian schools, where I talked to my pastor one day, and I said something about that, where I was like, well, we're Christians, right? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, Christianity is the right way to go, right? Yeah. Okay. Jesus was a Jew, and we're called Christians because we want to be like Christ, and Christ was a Jew, so why aren't Christians more Jewish?
That's a great point.
I don't think I ever got an answer. Yeah. I got a bunch of wheels spinning, and then a lot of, let's not talk about that.
Like avoiding the question, but that's why I was saying, when we're growing up and we're children raised and going through a religious school, we kind of can't get these questions answered.
Yeah.
That's why I mentioned it, because I've had some of the same kind of questions and they just kind of like avoid it, or they don't give you an answer, or they give you an answer like, this is the only way, this is right because it's said that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's written down in a book like that.
Yeah. And not to talk bad about the school that I went to or anything, because they, you know, of course they were great people, and
you want to call them out?
We did
Cancel
get,
no, I'm kidding.
No. We did get a lot of answers on things. We did get to talk about a lot of cool stuff. Especially the older we got through there, right? But back to the point, there are multiple religions that do talk about Jesus being a false prophet, or just, you know, some people even call him a magician. Yeah. But then again, some people also refer to the Bible as the greatest piece of literature in history. It's the greatest story ever told.
True.
So, you know, there's room for error and all these things when you're trying to really reach out there and put stuff together on this topic. But the most interesting part about it is how when we go to different countries who didn't necessarily really develop with Christianity.
So before we move away from Judaism real quick, I wanted to hit some points that basically call out the Christian Bible and some of the things that they preach about how Jesus was the actual like he's part of the Trinity, right? The Holy Trinity. He's the Son of God. He's God embodied in human flesh. So Judaism rejects Jesus as God, divine being, and being that intermediary between humans as God, Messiah, or holy, right? So that's the one. In Judaism, the idea of God as a duality or Trinity is heretical. It is even considered by some polytheistic. So it's like we're worshiping multiple gods. According to the Judaic beliefs, the Torah rules out a Trinitarian God in Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Right? So an actual Bible or Torah saying that he is not that part of the Trinity. So it's just, again, saying that he's just a man. Judaism teaches that it is heretical for any man to claim to be God, part of God, or the literal son of God. The Jerusalem Talmud, I don't even want to try to pronounce this. I'm going to write it out. Ta'anit 2:1, I'm sure that's like a chapter that they have, states explicitly, if a man claims to be God, he is a liar. So again, we're saying we were raised looking at Jesus as a Jew, right? And here Judaism, where they are Jews, are saying he's not the Son of God. He's just a man. In fact, he's a false prophet and a liar.
Right. So even the religious background that he grew up in kind of denied him.
Again, brings back up the point. The possibility that he could have married. The possibility that he could have children. The possibility that Jesus' bloodline is still going on. Maybe it's thinned out because generations to generations to generations. But if you want to think of Jesus as holy, but think of him as a man, that's just an important bloodline that's going through. And then, as you can see, this book right here, the Da Vinci Code, deals heavily with that. And that's why this idea was popularized in modern times, because it brought that idea to light that there is this bloodline that can still be breeding throughout the generations in our society.
That divine lineage, which, as far as the Da Vinci Code goes, and a couple other theories about that, gets really interesting because we have reports and accounts of Jesus going to many different places. Two primary places would be Japan or France, but of course there are still stories about him going to Russia, Siberia, France, Germany, a bunch of other European places. And on some accounts, they actually say that Jesus survived the crucifixion, which of course would be a terrible thing, because that means that he never went to the grave for 3 days and he never went to hell and arose from the dead 3 days later, which would put a hole in a lot of
Christian
beliefs. Yeah, for sure. But to talk about him surviving the crucifixion is kind of interesting, because there are religious sects out there that do crucifixions annually,
like reenactments,
and they are non-lethal crucifixions. Crucifixions didn't always result in death. It was a punishment.
Oh, you're talking about legit crucifixions.
Oh yeah, they
not
would legitimately crucify people, nails through the hands up on a cross. They do this actually a lot in the Philippines. On Good Friday, there is volunteers who will get crucified.
What a name.
There is one person, particularly in the Philippines, that does this, who's been crucified 33 times.
Oh.
Does it every Good Friday. So we can see that, crucifixion wasn't necessarily always used as a lethal form of punishment, because it's not the crucifixion that kills you, it's the time.
Yeah.
The positioning of your body when you're up there, you essentially just start to suffocate because your muscles just wear out, they get weak, and your body drops down, and you just die because your lungs literally can't move your body up enough to allow air to come in.
Well, speaking on Christianity terms, wasn't it that he got shanked? They stabbed him in the side with a sword or a spear or something.
Yes, they stabbed him in between
his
ribs.
That's what killed him? It wasn't necessarily just being up there, but it was all of that plus getting yeeted with the sword. Which
is interesting because as far as crucifixions go that are recorded in history, because it was a common punishment that was done to people, right? I mean, he was crucified with a thief, right?
Yeah, with thieves, yeah.
So,
a thief and a murderer, right?
A thief and a murderer, yeah. And we don't have any other accounts of people being stabbed during crucifixion between their ribs. So they kind of forced the death upon him, which is a lot of implications on that, a lot of interesting things. Typically what they would do to speed up crucifixions was break your legs.
Yeah.
Because then your body wouldn't be able to support itself that much faster, right? So anyways, point being, people believe that he could have survived the crucifixion, which as we can see was not always a lethal form of punishment. So now we're allowing that small percentage of possibility to enter the door. And then if he survived that crucifixion, well, that's really all we have written about him after that, isn't it?
Correct.
He could have fled.
Yeah, unless he pulled like the conspiracies about Hitler. I'm not comparing the two. I'm just comparing the conspiracies, because there's one that was very interesting when I read into it, and it was that Jesus actually fled to Japan. Right? It's on the same continent. They're just running on land, and this legend, not even a conspiracy, it's a legend in Japan that claims that the place of Jesus at the crucifixion was taken by his brother. While Jesus fled through what would become Russia and Siberia, he fled through those and got to Japan. So he kind of jumped offshore in China and got to Japan, where he became a rice farmer at... I'm going to write it again. Are you know how to pronounce it?
Amori.
Okay, Amori. At the north of the island of Honshu. It's claimed he married there and had a large family before his death at the age of 114, with descendants to the present. So this is almost guaranteeing our conspiracy here. This bloodline that he had children, but they just happen to be Japanese.
And they show that of course, that's kind of what I was leaning towards when I said, well, this is the end of the writings we have on Jesus is after the crucifixion, right? Wrong. Japan has this whole documentation of it. I mean, they even know that he lived to 114. Well, it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and on top of that, they have a place called the Grave of Jesus, which is also Cristo no Haka. Did I pronounce that one right? There we go. There attracts tourists. So a lot of people flock over to Japan just to see this place. Or if they just happen to be there, they'll go visit as well. This legend dates back to 1930s when a document claimed to be written in the Hebrew language and describing the marriage and later life of Jesus was discovered.
And then that document magically disappeared.
Well, isn't that the document that's in Harvard University, or that they're the ones analyzing it or something? I was reading something about that. That they were trying to transcribe or translate the Hebrew words on it.
Yeah, they were working on it. The document was around for a handful of years until it disappeared. But it was enough for it to go around in circulation and people to start analyzing it and trying to find the legitimacy of it. Before it just
up and away
ended up in a Vatican vault somewhere.
As everything does.
Good old Catholics, man.
Hell, this video might end up there. You guys might not even get to see it. It might get locked away forever.
Oh, let's not go that far with it, but yeah.
All right, so real quick, I got my last religion that I wanted to pick out that proves that, or not proves, but also identifies Jesus as being just a human, right? And this one is Islam. So Muslims believe that Jesus, called Isa, I hope I'm saying this right, was a prophet of God and was born to a Virgin Mary. They also believe he will return to earth before the day of judgment to restore justice and defeat al-Masih ad-Dajjal, or the false Messiah, also known as the Antichrist. So they, just like Judaism in the Torah, it says that or the Quran, my bad, they believe that he's just a prophet. He's just a human being. So there leads, that there could be the possibility that he was married, he had some children.
See, what I like when we put this all together, especially using all the different religions, and seeing people who view him as a man, people who view him as some form of deity, and then, of course, Christians who view him as God. How crazy is the conspiracy theory if he was legitimately a man, a prophet, a disciple, even divine, some form of deity, but it was still taking on human flesh, lived in the Middle East, and was out chilling around? Why would he not be married? Why would he not have kids?
Yeah, not only chilling around, but okay, if we can come to the consensus, right? Everybody, all these different religions say he is flesh. He is human, right? Even if he is some form of deity or God himself, is that the superpower that takes away hormones? Is he not able to, have those urges or any of that? I know it might say in certain religions that it's a sin to do that, but
even then, and then if he only married once, I mean, in the Christian Bible, it's, because we do know that Jesus wasn't able to commit sin.
Correct.
Right? Which is why God separated from him when Jesus had to go to hell for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, because God can't be a part of that. So if, of course, God being a part of Jesus not being able to sin, getting married and having children is not a sin. Why would he not be capable of doing that? And of course, depending on what type of scripture, what type of philosophy you follow, at the time, polygamy was not considered a sin.
As we just used as examples, Mormons.
Yeah, so to even push it further into him having multiple wives, the possibility is there. The possibility is definitely there for him to have one. It's all kinds of crazy things out there, man, and I love it so much. That's why I love getting so off topic on these things and talking about different religions and different viewpoints, because that's the whole point of falling off the edge of the world here with us, is to help open up people's eyes and not to discredit your religion, discredit your philosophy, tell you everything's a lie, but it's to help you understand where other people might be coming from.
Well, also to just not even, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but think outside of the box sometimes, think for yourself. Don't just follow something because it's written in a book or just because this older person's telling you this is the way. Just take a step back. Even if you believe it all you want, but have your questions. He says that, like God says, question, he'll answer. And then it's like when looking in this time that this is all going on, we're so focused in on like Jesus's community, what's going around in this little circle, but he's also having Egyptian influence, Roman and Greek influence. And like we were mentioning, those kings, those pharaohs, they were all married in their family. So who's to say that same influence wasn't shown in that little community? It's just the people that wrote about it probably had their, preferences or their opinions about it, and they chose to write about it a certain way or not.
And with all those different opinions and ideologies coming along, of course, we have people who are going to do all their philosophical writing based off of that. And it's a real shame when we sit back and we discredit people for having an opinion on one thing, and then we take the rest of their work and we throw it away.
Oh, are you talking like cancel culture?
A little bit.
Almost like it's happening now?
Because that's the point, and that's why that's really what we try driving home when we talk about this topic and this segment of Falling Off the Edge of the World, and why we bring you guys some topics that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. There's good reason for that, and that's because sure, people might have things that you're going to disagree with, and that's just called humanity. That's where we're from. It's where they're from. We can see these different cultures. Things are normalized in other places and not normalized somewhere else.
Yeah. And again, that's why we do bring up this segment. We do ask, or we would appreciate if you guys do interact with it, because I know we can get controversial on certain topics, and that's kind of the point. We want to bring that discussion out with the community. We want you guys to interact with us, because we're not saying we're right, we're not saying we're wrong, we're not saying what you're saying is right or wrong, but we like to just talk about it. The more we get to see other people's perspectives, the more we can grow as humanity.
That's the greatest thing of all, is just making that progress forward. And the only way we can move forward is to get there together. And the best way we can get together is by making sure that you guys are subscribed to the channel. Because when you do that, we get to keep a tight-knit community. It's great. And then if you want more people to join that community, then you have to like the video, because the all-seeing powers of YouTube and their algorithms need that to put us out there.
Or you can even take the power in your own hands and share it. Share this video with your friends and family. Share it with some people that you like to argue with, and see what their perspective is. All of our links are in our bio for our Facebook and Instagram. You can also interact with us there, or yell at us if you feel like that's the correct means of action. And all of our videos come out Monday, Wednesdays, and some Sundays.
That actually would be great. Make sure you do. You know what? You don't even have to say anything. Just share the video to your super religious aunt, and just don't say a word. Just video.
That would be so great.
Just for your enjoyment later on. It helps us. It helps you. It helps everybody. It's great.
So until next time, when your aunt's chasing us down, go and get.